Good evening, Rian Kutsia, Fortis Proactive Defense Solutions. I am talking tonight again to Jonathan Wright of the Firearms Policy Campaign. Jonathan, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Rian. It's good to be here.
Just for the viewers, we're going to do a two-part series talking about the Firearms Policy Campaign with the idea to introduce them to the viewers so that people can understand what they do and what they're about and how they are going about it. And hopefully, convince you that this is a good cause for you to fall in with. Jonathan, just quickly about you. You've been a firearms owner since 2017. You've one of the co-founders of the Firearms Policy Campaign, and you were later appointed the CEO. You have finished a 3-year postgraduate LLB, and you are in process of finalizing your 2-year LLB, a doctorate degree at Stellenbosch University, and the scope of which is entirely firearms related, which basically makes you probably one of the people with the most historic knowledge about firearms and their origins in this country. That's, it's obviously debatable, but I think it's quite possible. Jonathan, enough bragging. Let's get right into this and talk about the Firearms Policy Campaign. So I'm going to start with the basics. What is it? What is the Firearms Policy Campaign? What motivated the founding of the coalition? And how do you differ from existing pro-firearm organizations currently in South Africa?
So the Firearms Policy Campaign, which is often abbreviated to FPC for short, because it is a mouthful, was loosely based on or is loosely based on the Firearms Policy Coalition in the United States, who are very aggressively pro-firearm. But in the case of South Africa, the FPC we have a broad public safety approach. Firearms are a big part of it, and we would like to understand the role of firearm ownership as a social institution for the benefit of the country in South Africa's context. What motivated it so it's myself, it's Ahir Manuel, it's Chepi Mamekwa, and Antoinette Gordon. All 4 of those names are probably familiar to a viewer, or at least ringing a bell in the back of their head. And what motivated the formation was that we identified that within the broader firearm community in South Africa, there is it's very defensive in many regards. I'd say also quite apologetic in many senses, very conservative about how they do things. Very good at what they do, I should add. They have been very good at preserving the status quo, which is saying something when we've had what we've had from the government the past couple of years, the 2015 amendments, the 2018 amendments, the 2021 amendments, all of which failed. So how would we differ from that? Well, we try to be more aggressive, more unapologetic about firearm ownership in South Africa and what it means to be a firearm owner. As mentioned, the current community is very good at this defensive role, but in a way it's almost slightly ossified. They're not winning new ground, and that's where we would like to position the FPC going forward within this broader public safety approach, although with a focus on firearms.
Okay. You've emphasized when we talked about this previously that the South African firearm laws are very deeply flawed and potentially even absurd in places. Can you maybe just unpick the core problems with us and the mindset that it reflects?
So generally, the Firearms Control Act is a very arbitrary piece of legislation. Numerical limits on firearms and ammunition and conditions and caveats are inherently arbitrary. It's largely founded on the assumption that firearms cause crime. And this is something that the broader community has touched on in many times, but unfortunately is not something that they've really drilled down into. And it's not, they know that it's wrong, but I don't feel like they're always very able to articulate why in a convincing way for the general person in South Africa. Uh, my opinion and experience is that the general person in South Africa is not anti-firearm. They're not even necessarily pro. They're kind of indifferent about it. As long as there are minimum safeguards, they really don't seem to care all that much, even if they might not want to go get one themselves. The FCA is broadly about control, which is a natural evolution of firearm regulation in South Africa throughout its history. Just for the viewer's benefit, my doctorate is on the evolution of firearm control from the colonial era to the present day to identify those golden threads and motivations about why it developed the way that it did. And one of the things I found was that a lot of it's just, I mean, the Firearms Control Act, it is different in form to the law that came before it, the Arms and Ammunition Act of 1969, but the structure is the same. The rationale is the same. The principles are the same. Uh, it's just a natural evolution of that, more control. Gun-Free South Africa and its allies, the Gun Control Alliance in the late 90s, were a big reason for the fact that we got the Firearms Control Act. But at the end of the day, it's not much different to what came before it. And part of my doctorate is understanding why we got here, how we got here, and then we can challenge it. Which parts make sense to keep, which ones don't.
Okay, that makes sense. So a key part of your campaign is built around a long-term legal research, the project that you mentioned now. Can you maybe give us a little bit more background about your doctorate, what the research that it covers? You've now started touching on it in broad terms. Why this is so vital in this project of yours when it comes to ownership of firearms and firearms owners?
Oh, it's as I said, it's tracking this system of development, the stepping stones, where it started, how we got here, but more importantly, the motivations, the rationales for it. Because even if a lot of people might understand the Firearms Control Act very well, they may even understand the Arms and Ammunition Act quite well, but the rationale is the bit where there tends to be a lot more murky understanding, and you can't really understand it fully unless you understand everything that came before it, because then you can see how certain concepts came up and progress forward, like the Declaration of Unfitness that goes back to the 1937 Act. I'm not saying it's an example of bad law. I'm just saying that's just as an example. And there are other examples in there, the licenses, how we got the issue with renewals, which were not a thing previously. And the whole point of departure is we need to understand the past if we are to understand the present, if we are going to figure out where we want to go from here.
Okay.
It's very difficult to just rock up at Parliament and say, yo, we want a new law, give it to us. Like if we don't have a clue what we want it to look like. And yes, we might actually know what we want it to look like, but how do you articulate why it needs to look in that certain way? It's all part of this broader, more holistic picture. And when you can frame existing law in the context of the past, it broadens, it opens up. There's a lot more knowledge available, and it opens up arguments for constitutional arguments. The Constitutional Court is very sensitive when you can frame an argument in terms of past injustices, as an example. In South Africa, we might have broad ideas, vague notions of, yeah, okay, maybe gun control is racist at some point, but really nailing that down, it's not something that's really well documented. And so I'm hoping to provide a starting point for better understanding current law so that we can use what we know about the past to take us forward.
to take us forward. You've argued that the right to firearm ownership should be reframed through more universally accepted rights, things like dignity, life, personal security. Can you maybe just walk us through that thinking?
As much as I said just now that the average public sentiment around firearm ownership is more on the indifferent side than rather overtly for or against, it does remain something of it can be a thorny issue for people. It does get their hackles up, raise an eyebrow, and get them interested, maybe even slightly suspicious. If we can frame it in more universally accepted terms, it becomes a lot less controversial. If you say a right to farm ownership, that tends to get people immediately. You can see they start to perk up, and not necessarily in a good way. But if you say that everyone has an inherent right to self-defense, it's like, okay, yeah, cool. What else is new? People already know that it's accepted. No one can argue against you for that. And when you are able, or when we are able to better reframe firearm ownership in the context of rights such as that, uncontroversial, incontrovertible rights, we might stand a much better chance at winning people over. Because it's no longer about firearms, it's about self-preservation. And for all of the problems that the current crime rates and violent crime rates in South Africa bring us, the one thing it does give us is, well, no one's going to argue with you about this sort of thing.
Well, I tend to agree with that. I mean, our past is deeply flawed, and that's very well known. The impression that I'm getting is that your aim is trying to then use these facts of the past to try and sort of build something that's very uniquely South African firearms culture.
We want to make the issue of firearm ownership a lot more accessible and more familiar with people. People might not be super familiar with firearms. They might be suspicious of it, as I might have said. But if you can make it more relatable, they're much more likely to be like, yeah, okay, you know what? I can go along with this argument. Let's find out more. And as far as the Constitution is concerned, Section 12(1)(c) says that we all have the right to bodily integrity, and it's a normative right. It's like, okay, cool, it sounds great on paper, but that's all it is as far as the Constitution is concerned. Who is there to guarantee it? The state, nominally through the police, which we know, okay, cool, when seconds count, help is only minutes or hours away. So it becomes a big case of, as Gideon Yobert says, be your own first responder in an emergency. And firearm ownership becomes a way to vindicate these rights. It's not a really well fleshed out right in constitutional jurisprudence. The Constitutional Court has said, okay, cool, yes, you have the right, but at this point it's ex post facto, it's after the fact, which is not helpful if you are dead or raped or whatever.
That makes sense. That's never helped much. And I'm certainly a big proponent of the whole you are your own first responder situation, because that remains true whether you want to accept it or not. That is just the case. Jonathan, I'm going to end part 1 of this video here, and then shortly we will carry on with part 2. For the viewers, we will have Firearm Policy Campaign's details up on the screen of the video, and to make it easy for you to go and check them out and follow them on their social media. Speak to Jonathan if you've got questions or you are interested in what they are doing. And then if you are interested in any of the loan operator training courses, there is always a link provided in the description below. Click on it, check it out. We hope to see you on a range one of these days. And as always, click on that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click on that bell icon so you can be reminded of more videos coming. Thank you so much, Jonathan. That's me. I'm
Thank you,
off.
Rio.
Have a good evening. Cheers.